when this country was founded, they did not intend on women and black people or people of any race besides white voting. And in order to prevent that, one, they made sure that black people were only considered 3/5 of men in the Constitution. They also ensured that black people would not have the ability to learn, to be able to learn how to read, to educate themselves. I'll tell you a story, and it's a true story. My great-great-grandfather was a son of a slave. I think this was 1890, around that time period. Post Civil War, he was a sharecropper in North Carolina, and he wanted to buy his own land. He didn't want to continue to live as a sharecropper because there was really no growth there. He had a family to feed, and he knew that in order to get his own land, he would have to learn how to read. So, every night, he and a friend of his who did know how to read would spend every night learning how to read by candlelight in this barn every night. One day, a white person on the land that he was working had learned, probably by hearing conversation, that my great-great-grandfather wanted to buy his own land, and was trying to do so by learning how to read, which back then was a great crime. So that night, the Ku Klux Klan decided to get together, got on their robes, got their torches, went to the barn that my great-great-grandfather would use to read. At that time, he was by himself. He was reading by candlelight, and the Klan came in, dragged him out, gouged his eyes out, hung his body, and then burned him. And they took a picture of it, and they put it on the front page of the paper the next day. That is suppression of empowerment, suppression of growth, suppression of being a human. When you are dehumanized to the extent of being charred meat and advertised on the cover of a newspaper to sell papers, that dehumanizes anybody.
The secret ballot, by the way, was also one step in the South for voter suppression, which we don't talk about a lot, but the reason why the Democrats in the South picked up on the secret ballot and they wanted it is because the high proportion of African Americans were illiterate. And the secret ballot meant you can't come in with your ballot already in place. You had to be able to read the ballot that was in there. And so it was the secret ballot was used as a method of voter suppression in the South originally. It's intimidation. That is an ugly type of voter suppression, which I hate to say does exist still in many areas. You know, just the people who are doing their open carry outside of a polling place could be intimidating. You know, it's a really awful method of voter suppression.
The stories that I've just told you, and the stories that any black person in this country can tell, despite being an African American, are stories that we live. So, what can white people do? White people can, one, vote, as everyone should do. Everyone should be voting. But also white people can get into their own segments of society. As I mentioned, my segment of society is medicine. Because of systemic racism, because every system has a component of racism associated with it, white people who are in those systems, who are now woke and aware of these systems of racism and oppression, that they can actually do something about it. These people in a dominant caste are dominant in their own sectors of life. They can change the narrative by giving more people of color and people who have different outlooks on life than their own platforms to actually have conversations on, to actually have representation on. When we have a society that truly reflects the country that we live in, both demographically, emotionally, and politically, we will achieve that notion of a true America that is for the people, by the people. But we have to get there first. The society was designed for white men. When those white straight men, white straight women, white people in general, say that I accept my privilege, I understand that I have been privileged and that I am only here because of my privilege, and that everyone else deserves to have just as much privilege as I have, and they're willing to change the rules to allow that to happen instead of fighting them tooth and nail like they are right now with voter suppression, that is when things can change. And so that's what I think people can do. If there's a single thing that people in the dominant caste can do, it is by changing the rules so that it can benefit everyone and not just themselves.